Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of TA Tech Unboxed, the podcast that is chatting to the people behind the tools that we use in the TA and HR communities every day. If you're listening to this right now on Spotify or Apple, and you check out the link in the description, you'll find a shortcut to our YouTube channel where you'll be able to see a bunch of demos and other interviews with our other guests from the show. So please don't hesitate to take a look, and don't forget to subscribe while you're there. I'm Chris Haslam. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Bush. Mr. Darren Bush, how are you?
I am feeling very, very energetic for a Monday. Yeah.
Oh my God.
How are you feeling?
You know what? Positive. It's sunny outside. You know, the low pressure system has disappeared. I'm feeling good.
I think it's what it is. It's you know, it's changed my mood.
I see a trainer who's a bit of a hippie. If he's watching this, I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me. He, every time there's low pressure systems, he changes my workouts. Like we do more like yoga flows than we do like, you know, press ups and stuff. When the pressure system's down, because you know your body hurts. So interesting, isn't it?
Wait, so what would you want more of? So you want more yoga stuff rather than?
I want to look like him. I don't really care. I don't really care as long as it's like a good workout, but I'm not in agony at the end. I'm happy. Yeah. So, but today when he answered the phone, he was like, "Oh my God, what a beautiful day it is today. The low pressure system's gone," and I'm going in my head like, "Oh, hang on, that means press ups."
It does.
That means press ups.
Squats.
I was really enjoying the yoga flow, but now I've got to do press ups. But yeah, it's good fun. It's beautiful outside, so we'll appreciate that.
Put it there. That's the worst thing about it now. Every time I'm going to look at a sunny day, and we're thinking, Chris is going to be doing press ups and squats now.
There you go. Spoil it feels like. So before we get into this week's show, Darren, I wanted to ask you a question because you posed me a great one last week about marketing. I wanted to ask you about AI in recruiting and what your point of view is on it right now.
Yeah, my point of view is probably how long we got. So first of all, I'll say there's a lot of talk obviously about ChatGPT, and I know there are instances you can use it, but I'll say move that aside. Let's talk about how tools, software like ATS, sourcing, how are they going to use AI? I think that's where we're going to probably leverage it the most. And I like to see, and I'm a big fan of AI, and we've got a special guest as well coming up soon, and Stan from Scotty.ai. He's got some big predictions for how things are going to change around less recruiters. But I do feel it will leverage us really and improve and streamline so the part of the process which is quite manual. It will more outreach. You'll be able to schedule more. You'll be able to contact more.
An enabler.
It's an enabler, yeah, it is. And I feel it's we're getting close, and there's some really good interview tools, you know, from MetaView and Brightheart that you're seeing. Talking of which, Brightheart just launched today their AI job advert creator based on the roles, and you can do an interview planner based on that job advert as well. So it does everything from the beginning all the way through to the interview evaluation. So you're going to start seeing people sort of join the dots.
There's a strange narrative, isn't there, about it? Because it's not going to replace us. It's going to be a useful co-pilot, but that is going to facilitate my ability to do more work in my day and thus stop me from hiring more recruiters, is my vibe. So whether it's by proxy, I'm hiring less people because the workload is not as complex, or whether everybody's got this co-pilot and I'm actually going to... That's the bit I find really interesting. I think it's like, I don't really see it replacing me. I spend more time prompting these days than I do actually writing a job description. I don't know.
It's a question. Could you increase your rec load with AI, or do you think it would be around the same?
Which in turn diminishes the amount of folks you need, right, in your team. Because if you can all take on more recs, you don't need as much capacity or capability.
What's the percentage though? Just ballpark. What do you see it changing?
I'm not now. I'm not seeing it increasing my ability to take on 20%
I'm not either.
recs. No, but I am being able to do better work faster. So my assumption is downstream, it will turn into more requisitions in my book, right? I think. I don't 100% know that. It's certainly not how we're thinking about it here at Move. Like, we're not seeing it as a replace everybody with AI. Because there are other issues and it's not quite ready for that yet. And I don't know whether I feel comfortable selling a service that is all AI driven, considering how hard we've worked to make sure people get results, you know, and feel like they've got their own individual team built. But that's what Copilot is. So, you know, stay open-minded. Stay open-minded about its capability. Try and use it everywhere. Like, I'm doing some experimenting at the moment with outreach emails, and I have used Notion's AI to help me write a experiment, like documentation. So, you know, the control case and all the use case stuff that you write down before you run the experiment. Notion AI helped me write the whole thing. That would have taken me a couple of hours, maybe. You know, I've done it for documentation, for learning and for content, but and I haven't done it like this for a long time. So it's hard to really remember how long I spent on it, but I certainly saw that document get created super quickly.
That's great, isn't it? You can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And who do we have on today's show, Darren?
So today, Chris, we've got Ben Omani, CEO and co-founder of Jobs ASI. I'd love you to do a quick intro, Ben, and hopefully maybe include a little bit about how you became Time of the Year 2006. That'd be lovely if you can mention that.
Hold on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Times Person of the Year 2000.
Times Person. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, if you look it up, it was all about, you know, personal data. So we're all Times Person of the Year 2006. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a joke to get people interested on LinkedIn.
I like it. It got me intrigued. I was like,
hey man, it's all about, you know, it's all about getting that foot in the door, right?
Yeah.
Get a little bit of intrigue. So I started off my career. So I studied maths, went into recruitment, like a lot of people did, and built and ran a few of my own companies at that point, and then decided, hey, I wanted to get into the startup game. So moved into in-house, like head of talent. Was really lucky in that actually in all the places that I've been, there have been amazing engineers who've always been happy to sort of tell me more about what they do. So I got back into coding. I was doing some sort of automation with Python, and you know, eventually I was really lucky that one of my employers allowed me to sort of make that transition over from sort of director of ops at that point into sort of interim head of engineering or interim engineering manager. And yeah, so last 5 years I've been building data and machine learning platforms and products for companies like Cytora, Curve, Infogrid, and yeah, last year got made redundant, as again quite a few people did. And you know, I thought, hey, why not combine those two experiences, right? Rather than it being like, you know, a head of engineering who's great at hiring, like, can I build a product with the skill set that I've, you know, developed in the last 5 years that really works for talent teams? And yeah, that's where Jobs ASI came from. And yeah, really kind of, like I said, does what it says on the tin, artificial specific intelligence for talent. Definitely not good at naming things, but hey ho.
We'll talk about that. We're going to definitely bring that up again later on because for those of you that don't know, Ben runs a weekly webinar.
Yeah.
Cast.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn Live, where we go through a lot of the news about AI and how it relates to people and talent. So,
but I want to go back to your time at Travel Nest, right? It's the place you were head of talent. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and like what was like super challenging to you at that particular time?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting thing. That was my first in-house gig. I'd sort of got my own consultancy, which was, you know, had contractors out, was doing really well. And I was just like, right, you know, it's not motivating me. So moving to a startup in Edinburgh at the time, I was living there. So yeah, super interesting team. Founder was relatively young, but like super impressive. He raised a good bit of money. In fact, like a huge amount in Scotland. Very different, the scale of the community there, but really interesting. And we managed to attract a couple of Skyscanner lot. So it was really interesting in that I was sort of number 6 hire for them. They were just about to go through this massive scale-up journey. But again, they had someone who just exited, for like 1.6 billion or whatever they had. This CTO was there 1 day a week, Alistair Han, and he was just an unbelievable operator. He really knew what was needed, both at like that very early stage, which was where we were, but also, how that scaled up into sort of 400, 500 person engineering teams. So, yeah.
And that's the CTO that encouraged you to get into engineering, is it?
Yeah, I would say so. But then also, so we ran the, because we only had him there for 1 day a week, I spent basically like 4 days finding people for him to interview and 1 day interviewing them with him. And because it was like his time was there to sort of build that team, I actually sat in on those interviews with him so we could get like that really direct feedback. Yeah. And that was definitely very inspiring. But then also the other engineers in the team, they were very helpful and, more than happy. And I think, you guys have worked in these sort of places, I'm sure, like actually you end up getting very like, becoming really good friends with different people in a smaller startup. And then they're really happy to teach you anything and everything. And, very much open to teaching, especially same mistakes over and over again. I seem to make right at the beginning of that coding journey.
I mean, that's semi-unique though when you look at startups. I would say like typically, like recruiting isn't, for the engineering team isn't hugged like that. Like you say, we're often just there to do a job. So that's cool. They're still running Travel Nest.
Yeah, I believe so.
Cool. Legacy, bit of a legacy there. First talent person, set it all up, ready to go. Love that. And you go from these guys and you head over to, excuse me, because I've lost your package here, but I mean, that's right. And you went in straight in as a director of operations. So you're in this, you've changed roles again from.
So I went in, I actually went in as head of talent. Then I was quickly promoted to head of people, then director of ops. So yeah, like but just to simplify things, I've already got a, weird enough career journey on LinkedIn. I just thought I'd compress it and make it more simple. But yeah,
it's amazing that you've gone pretty high up in terms of on that, within the talent field, and all of a sudden you just made that little change. What was that point where you thought, I want to go and do something else, or what was it? It's just always something sort of niggling in the back of your mind that you could go and do it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's something around like, I sort of like early on in my career, like one of the reasons I chose moving into recruitment was this idea of like actually setting up your own recruitment agency was like, okay, cool. That's actually relatively straightforward to do, right? You just have to be good at BD and good at filling the jobs. And yeah, like scaling it.
I wish it was that. I wish it was that.
Well, it's that easy. Chris makes it look hard, but it's actually easy.
Yeah.
My blood pressure makes it.
Chris, you're like a swan there. It's the legs paddling under the water that no one sees. You seem to handle it with grace.
With a lot of body under the water. It's actually just my neck. You can see.
Okay, maybe difficult, but conceptually easy, right?
I mean, you're right, though. It is, isn't it? Like you can just pick up your book of contacts and people you've spoken to. It can be that simple, and actually, it should be that simple. But I agree with you. Like, it's not. Then the money pours in. There's hard work, a lot of time you put in without that, and it's hard to build that runway. So you get to that point, and then you change it, which to me is like, bravo.
That's what I mean. I think starting's easy, scaling is hard. So I sort of going out on my own found all of the areas which, I realized I didn't know very well, as a lot of people do. And, was like, okay, cool. I think actually I want to build a business that's more automatable, more technically focused, where you can scale it more easily and not just with bodies. And so it's like, okay, cool. I need to learn these skills in the product engineering space. Moving then into startups, that was when I was like, right, okay, cool. Like this is the information I need. This is how people on the code face are sort of building products. So, I was very much just like acting like a sponge, absorbing as much as I could. And yeah, I think it's one of those ones where you don't sort of feel like you're making the progress. But I think, yeah, like I was always surprised actually when I went to my first only engineering job at Curve, where people didn't know that I'd moved over from like, HR or talent.
Something else.
Were like, oh yeah. But you know what we're doing because you've done a computer science degree. And I was like, well, I've definitely not done a computer. I mean, I did a maths degree, but there's some crossover, but it's more of a crossover with data science, I'd say, than pure engineering.
I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't shared this with Chris. You did what I wanted to do when I think it was 30 at the time. I started doing Code Academy. Yeah. And I was learning, and same. I was working for a startup, and everyone around you is kind of you're creating products, and I loved that part. I remember thinking back then that I was like, I'm 30. I don't know if I should do a career change.
Yeah.
And I look back and think, I probably should have stuck with it a little bit, because you can still do it, and you just showed that you've done it. You've been very successful at it as well. It's great.
And the interesting thing, so I sort of did it the other way in terms of like, actually, one of the areas where people really struggle to hire is in engineering management. And a lot of the skill sets that you build in terms of the empathy, understanding what makes people tick, like motivating, persuading people, understanding their problems and passing them on to other people, like that's what recruiters do. That's what people do. That's actually, there is a huge crossover there in terms of skill set that you sort of take for granted maybe. So I actually I'm doing more coding now as a founder than I've ever done in any of my engineering roles, because most of the time I spent actually working with the team and understanding what they were doing and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So actually, like not even going in. So for me, it was like, actually there's a career path there. And I've met a couple of other recruiters who've done that same,
interesting,
straight into management and leadership and learning on the job, like the more detailed, finer technical points when you're like, cool. Like,
because as an engineering leader, you are often less times looking at lines of code. Is that what it is? And more trying to get projects. It's more project management of code. Is that why?
Yeah. And, there's an element of, retaining people, building, coaching them, mentoring them, building the team, hiring people. So there's big bits of that are similar. There's every company does it a bit differently. There's some that are more like tech lead style. There are some that are more only people, have nothing to do with the project management. There's some where you've got to pick up bits and pieces. I think, you find often like the engineering manager does end up being a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none kind of situation. So, again, that suits perfectly
to be a founder.
I was say it's perfect for Chris and I then. I mean, yeah.
It's quite similar to be a founder. I'm quite often, sitting in a room with, okay, cool, I've got to work this people experience task. And I'm like,
I think people underestimate that. Like, how much you learn when you're put in those situations, and actually how you can come up with a much more nuanced, like, answer if you're the second best at every single thing in the room, whereas everyone else, there's an individual who's the best at one thing, but actually,
because you're looking at it green, like you're looking at it completely free of any history. I agree with that. Like I'm 100%. Like I remember I learned to use spreadsheets. I never really ever needed to use one for any other reason beyond, can you fill in that one column for me, please, Chris, up until starting my own business and having to put together a P&L, which was sometimes a lot of complicated maths in it. And I remember not sleeping one night all night. So I was like, I'm in it now. I don't know how to do if sums, but I do know how to get other sheets to speak to each other. I don't want to lose where I am. I've just got to finish this. It took me all night to do it, to produce my first P&L for my first ever, like when I was 24, raising my first bit of family money to start my recruitment business. It's fascinating, isn't it? How you get when you get in that seat and start to learn stuff. Adriano, my business partner now, for those that don't know, I know you guys have met him. He always talks fondly of a book he read about creating memories, and they come from new experiences, and how COVID robbed a lot of us from that. Because we were doing the same thing in the same prison every day. And it was really difficult for us to create new sparks. Life seems really short when you don't create new memories. Time passes so quick. When you think about the periods of lockdown, how quickly did they fly by us, right? It's really it was resonating with me. Mentioned it, read a book about it. I'll grab the book and I'll put the link in the comments for everybody else. But it was a really interesting idea that we were discussing. So we tried at work to get people to create new experiences so that they were creating new memories so the time didn't fly by. And really difficult. Don't know how the hell we got onto that, but
it makes sense, right? Like, and I think that's it, right? In terms of, like it was kind of that experience for me where I was like, I was like admin for DBR. I was talking with all these people around like what people were thinking around with talent. And I was just not that I was like the best of the best, but like, that 80-20, I was just like, right, I've got the 80% here of this role. And, it might take me 20 years to become the top 1%. Whereas actually, like, if
you make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. If you find you can go around picking up these different 80%, they're all different experiences. Like you said, like it makes life a bit richer. You've got like different areas. You remember it more. You remember those challenges. Yeah. I mean,
I mean, there's also the rocket up your arse of you've got to get on with it and turn it into something that makes money that you could survive on as well, which I think sometimes gives direction and purpose. Which
there's something beautiful about not having a choice.
True.
There's
focused mind.
Yeah, it's where magic happens.
It does. Do you want to talk about then how you set up Jobs ASI? So that at that point you were working, you're managing, you're leading a team, and then you've now pivoted.
Yeah. So I was leading a team at Infogrid. We weren't doing so well. Redundancies coming up. So I started interviewing and for different sort of head of data engineering, like head of ML kind of roles. And I got a couple of job offers that were working for like £1 billion recruitment companies to basically take generative AI and sort of slam it into recruitment somehow. And they were like, you'll do it. And I was like, okay, great. Sounds fun. We'd already built at that point, like we'd integrated text to SQL. So where in Slack, you could just ask a question, went off to our data warehouse, come back with an answer. We'd put the answer and the context of the question in, and it would explain your answer in like natural language, which was super cool. So I was like, right, there's something here. This is pretty awesome. It just got to that point where it was just like, right, you can come and do it at these companies, but they were like, right, you've got 12 other things you need to fix first. By the way, we don't ingest data well. We don't do this data. We don't store it. We don't, there's all sorts of issues with these massive companies that you just have to do before you can get onto the fun stuff. They're like, okay, cool. This is actually client facing there. So really that's priority number one. And I just sort of realized, okay, cool. The really cool stuff that they're like enticing me in on, that's priority number 12 or 13. I'm not going to get to that. Like if these guys are doing this,
also what we pay for as well, isn't it? It's quite often what as a founder you sort of pay for. You're like, I can see it being priority, but it's not priority one. We're happy to pay for those things because we want them to be part of our stack. But if we can buy our way to success for something, it's a clever strategy, really, if you think about it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Effectively, I was just like, right, like that sounds like a really cool, interesting problem. Like, I think we can get a certain distance along with this. And the reality is that, I've spoken to a lot of people in this HR tech space, and they all are interested in that area. They just don't, they have 100 other things that they are certain will bring revenue, like these little tweaks that need to be made to an applicant tracking system or like another piece of software, that all customers are asking for. They know they can quantify how many customers are churning because they don't have XYZ feature. And like, this is something that, you need a bit of an understanding around like data and machine learning systems. There's not necessarily too much of that. You'd have to sort of build a team, like, invest in it heavily for a good amount of time. So we were like, right, okay, actually, let's see if we can do this, and then integrate and be that sort of headless intelligence that sort of helps move things along. And yeah, so far it's pretty exciting what we've been able to achieve, because, you know, and we know other founders who are like having to build the whole ATS at the same time. And actually, there's so many things you need to do to get to feature parity, right? If you could use AI in an ATS, but it doesn't have requisitions, for example, which is a classic thing that you need once you get to a certain scale, you know, you're just not going to make the change because your controls process is gone. Even though you might be more efficient with the AI, you've got like controls that you need to put into place. And you're like, right, well, that's kind of like a must have for us. And, you know, these systems that we've already got, they have it. We're not going to change them. And those systems are also like not built ML first. So they're going to really struggle to integrate it. So we're like, right, here's that market where actually we can just focus down on some small problems that we feel like we've got an unfair advantage of solving. And, you know, they hopefully will be able to provide like an outsized impact for those companies using them.
What kind of problems are you specifically focusing on right now then?
So the number one problem we started on was, we called it the chicken plucker problem, because one of our early customers, we were talking about some of the things that were frustrating them, and there's this person who'd applied to their job, the head of engineering for the startup, and they were a chicken plucker. Like that was their current role, and you know, it was clear that this person had never done any engineering from the CV, not even close to being ahead of, but they'd applied for some reason, and it was just like, right, you know, this is a time waste effectively. So we started to look at that, and I think the last year or so that trend has been increasing, right, with AI powered applications, with lots of layoffs, like fewer roles, lots of people more actively looking because of, unfortunately, redundancies. You've seen that application volume increase dramatically. And so being able to cut through that noise and find signal, that's one of the first things that we've sort of focused on. So we're looking at a couple of different ways in which we can assess and kind of do that sort of first pass so that we can then make the recruiters more efficient going forward, not have that like, oh, there's 350 in the applied over the weekend, you know, and I've just got to get through it because there's definitely roles in there. Yeah. But it happens all the time. And like, you've got that. And like, here's the thing. As a human, by the time you get to 349, like, how well is your motivation going? Are you still assessing with as fresh and as open a mind as at the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, there's no way, like, it's not possible. Not only from the point of view of fatigue, right, of fairness as well. Yeah. There's absolutely no way you can review that many CVs with that much rigor, right? Yeah. To be fair. I don't
know if there's any analysis on that. Did you get more, as you go through the CVs, you kind of get more harsher as you kind of go through, because you're getting to a point where it's like, okay, this is, I think there is, right? That's my personal opinion. You're a bit more
through because I'm lovely, love everybody and everyone.
But at the beginning, you're a bit more softer, but afterwards, like, okay, this is not, you know, not cutting it. And you start thinking, did I let a few people in I shouldn't have done?
I was at 2 passes, so for me, you say 17 hours, like that's just one flipping job.
Yeah,
sometimes I'd take like 2 passes at the sake, because the first 20% of applicants, I'm always like, wow, this person looks unreal. Like, I definitely want to speak to them. But then you get to the bottom, you're like, oh, hang on. Am I not going to get the chance to speak to these people because of, you know, what I did at the top? But you want to be fair. You know what I mean? So it's super difficult to do that. And I do believe that's a really great spot for what you're building.
I mean, there's definitely studies around from the legal profession. So judges giving sentences before lunch are much more harsh than after just eating. Yeah. And you know, if it's getting to 11 o'clock and you come in with like, oh, Monday, I'm just going to hit the ground running, and you spent 2 hours trudging through CVs, and now you're ravenous, like, you're going to be much harsher. I imagine there's going to be a corollary there. And I think it's this other idea, right? In data, we've got two like kind of speeds of data. You've got batch and streaming. So batch is the way recruiting works, right? You come in the morning and you do a batch of CV reviews, right? And then you go and do something else. And you maybe batch some interviews together, right? That's efficient use of your time. You're not like just finishing up on an interview, like thinking about the next actions and then jumping in, reviewing 5 CVs and then jumping onto another call. You're not going to be able to, focus on that stuff. So we do batch. And streaming is like this idea of like, right, as soon as a candidate comes in, we can assess them against the same scorecard that every other candidate's assessed against and give you like, a score, a ranking, and you'll go in and be like, okay, cool, here it is. And, now I've got that sort of triage. And, the way we're doing it, we're very much leaving it open to people deciding where their comfort is, because there's always a trade-off in my mind between, automation and accuracy, right? Where I think, we as talent professionals tend to think kind of anyone could do the job given the right training and like motivation and whatnot. And actually that's not the question we're asked, really when we're looking to hire. The question is like, right, of the people who've applied and the people I could headhunt, like where's the best ROI going to be for the business? Like who's the most likely to not only just like deliver, but also thrive in this organization? So you've actually, we often are very worried about rejecting people out of hand because it might, given the right environment, grow into that role. And that's certainly true. But actually it's, when contrasted against someone who's going to hit the ground running, we often take that sort of route, right?
It's the easy route, isn't it? We're talking about the argument almost for skills-based hiring, aren't we? A little bit. It's like removing the CV altogether and having folks.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's effectively what we're doing, right? Because we're reformatting their experience into the same skills. We're actually, getting to that point where you don't necessarily need to look at the CV because it's a consistent format. That's one of the main issues, right, of CVs is, if you're looking at 200 CVs and all of a sudden someone's got like a really nice shiny one with all of the graphics, some people are like, oh, shiny. And other people are like, oh, can't read it, hate it, on to the next one. And like,
the more you try, the worse it gets for you, isn't it? Sometimes
it's here. I think it's 50-50 at that. You hit the nail. I think some recruiters look at it and go, "You've broken my flow. I don't like that. I'm looking for certain things. You made it harder for me. Oh, it's a rejection." But the others will go, "This is different. I like this."
I'm going to throw something controversial out here, but I think recruiters as a whole write the worst CVs I've ever seen.
No, that's not controversial. I think that's true.
It's like I've never seen a group of people consistently, and we get a lot of applications for our roles. We're very lucky that we've built up a really good brand here. We care about our candidate experience. It's a big part of our service, so we have to care. So we get lots and lots of applications for every role that we get, and honestly, the consistency is like. Yeah, awful.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think recruiters are better editors than they are creators in this when it comes to CV. I think they're really good at editing other people's CVs and giving viewpoint where this is what needs to change. But you ask them to start from scratch, they're like they struggle.
I think this is generally a human thing, though. Like it's so much easier to criticize someone else's thing than to make something good yourself.
It is, yeah.
It's just it's like, oh, that's wrong. You're like, okay, cool, like. But, if you ask me to do that thing, it would be half as good. So, it's,
funny enough, I was, pre-recruiting days, I worked in a news office, not as a writer. It was a PR team of a news office. And we were taught to read, like newspapers at speed. So, I was taught that title, like context, result and outcome, like you get taught a little pattern of stuff, and so I took that into recruiting, made me really good at looking at CVs really quickly, right, and be able to make a judgment, read the key points from a CV, and draw them out super fast. So you just look for certain words and phrases, right? They're grouped together and they mean things. If you think about it beforehand, it's really simple. So if you're looking for an engineer as an example, you read your job description really well. It's really easy to skim a CV for a candidate, to look for the words that you're looking for, to validate your point, there's probably loads of bias in there, by the way, for our listeners. Please don't kill me on this. But this is the way I was taught to read a newspaper.
But this is the thing, right? Like, you know, and like, so I've come across this, and we're looking at bias in this like a really interesting way in terms of like we're working with a third party, and we're basically changing things in the CVs and seeing if that changes scores. And obviously, the things that we're changing are going to be protected characteristics, so they shouldn't change. But that kind of testing is almost impossible to do, and potentially dangerous to do in your own talent teams, because, you know, like if you're going through that exercise, then you have to take action, I think. And some of these, a lot, like 99% of these are unconscious biases. And the studies show that even if you are trained to uncover your unconscious biases, you still, and you know about them intellectually, you know, again, given that scenario where...
Probably a bias for that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You still...
Conscious intelligence bias or something.
Yeah, no, that's it. Like, there's a bias where if you read a lot about biases, then you think you know a lot about biases, and you think you're not affected by bias.
You can't be, but yeah,
but you
can't win. It's not it's a zero-sum game, isn't it? We're not trying to eradicate them. It's trying to build a controlled environment for which you can produce a result that is absent or mitigates bias. It's not a zero. We're not looking for zero bias.
Except in AI, where we are. and that's the thing where it's just like, I don't know, for me, like one of the feedback I've given would be like, is there a way that we can show that we are directionally less biased? Because that would be useful in terms of quantifying that delta. So to be like, no, we are still biased because we're using LLMs built on human data on the internet, which is biased, right? It's not biased in a direct way in which we have a feedback loop between who you hire. And if you hire in a biased way, then you have a biased machine learning loop, which is what a lot of other people have had in the past. We don't have that sort of that causal loop that retrains and gets better. And it's this constant sort of, it's an interesting way.
In AI, you mean?
Yeah, in AI.
Right.
Because we've been asked, does it learn who we want to hire and get better as we do it? And we're like, no, because you will end up like, you know, I think the best example is like in a Spotify playlist loop where you'll only listen to the
same song
over and over and over again. And that's actually like,
that's interesting.
What you want is a randomizer that, you know, the only consistent thing between, you know, who you're hiring is their ability to do the role. And yeah, that's very difficult to measure and very difficult to prove, impossible to prove basically that you're doing. But fast.
That's the counter argument, isn't it? Every time I think it'd be probably a year or 2 years ago when you brought in about AI, everyone would quote the Amazon case, and that's been the challenge of saying it's you know, there's bias in AI, but I think people forget that there's bias in recruitment. So
AIs are trained.
It's already evident.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, like it's not a redundant argument, but it is like, because it's based on humans. Like if we had a perfect species of aliens that were never biased, right? And we based it on them, it would be quote unquote unbiased or perfect, right?
No.
That's not the case. All of these systems are built using human data, and we're just encoding those biases. And that's not a bad thing, as long as you're aware of it and you can correct it in a system. It's way easier to correct bias in a inorganic system than it is an organic system. Because you don't have anyone to persuade, you know, and you can do large range like data tests very quickly at scale. So, you know, whenever we release new features, we test them on 10,000 candidates and see those statistical differences. Now, that might be a year for a recruiter, right? So by the time you know with good statistical certainty that they are biased, if that's even possible to understand in that scale of data, a year's gone by, and where are you at with it? And then you say, okay, cool, let's try and correct that bias. Now okay, cool, well, let's wait another year to find out if that's worked. When average tenure in startups is 18 months, they're, by the time you've done anything, they're off. I think there are definite advantages to looking at this from an AI point of view. So my argument's not that it's not important. It's very important, but it's just that, there are actually benefits to knowing that it's biased, because you can then fix those biases and test to make sure that you're not adversely affecting any protected characteristics.
I love that you're championing this element to it. Because I think a lot of folks would just go easy money, record my interviews, or I don't know, that's not fair on some products that have done a great job there. I feel I sound like I'm on the BBC.
Yeah, no, I mean,
but you know what I mean? It's like you've gone for something that is, we haven't talked about what jobs ASI is, pre-demo. Can you give us a little, platform introduction?
So, yeah, and as the other thing, obviously, that, because we're to some degree headless, it's not as exciting a demo as you might get in other things. But we do a couple of things. The first thing we do is we ingest all the jobs data. We turn job descriptions into scorecards. And then we assess candidates against the scorecards. When we were assessing just against job descriptions, we've found that we were getting too woolly a result that wasn't usable. So we've structured the data a lot more. We've got, scorecards, criteria for each level, 0 to 3. And then we aggregate that up into a percentage score. And we post that into the applicant tracking system. So you have that data where you're doing the work. The idea here is, don't want another screen. We want to make you faster, but to do that, we've got to use the tools that you're using.
So, just to make sure I'd get that in layman's for everybody listening and pre them watching the demo, because I've seen some stuff and I've worked on a few bits in the past on visualizing some of the workflows, which, by the way, blew my mind and gave me so many ideas of how we could do things better. So let's say we're inside our ATS, it will post as a score. So it's not like it's a piece of software that runs concurrently, not something we log into and use daily. It's something that assists us where we work.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the idea, right? You don't need another tool to log into to see what to do all the time. Though we do have something just so we can show a demo, right? But yeah, I mean, look, if you like, I can literally show you now. It's 2 minutes. I've got it up here. I took the liberty of putting us against a job and see it.
Chris, do you want to do this reader?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. For those listeners, maybe on Spotify anyway. I'm putting the video on there, so you should be able to see this on video. Go for it, minutes.
So yeah, so here we've got head of talent role and a name we might recognise. So this role was something I slapped together in ChatGPT, which is why, because it's for us, it's got some understanding of application of AI and ML in talent and research. So yeah, we've got these 4 criteria. And again, because I've used your public-facing LinkedIn profile, we're not getting 90% of the data that you would get from a CV. But yeah, here we've got the link.
You say you haven't seen my CV.
Well, yeah, true.
Which is literally nothing on it.
So yeah, we get the data here, and if you're actually going into so this is Ashby, so other things differ, but most of them have some idea of application review. So again,
this is a stage in the process, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I can add that and okay, cool.
So yeah, if I move,
let's skip to the chase, Ben. Did I get the job?
Hey man, you did pretty good. You got
50%, buddy. 8% less than me.
There you go.
It's close though.
Standard for me. It's always nearly there.
Okay,
we've got
that's cool
things, and then
yeah,
better than that in saved searches, you've got this where you've got the score, and you can score, and you can do all your bulk actions here. So you can archive all of us because none of us are getting this job. But yeah,
reject on mass. It's an instance that lives inside Ashby. That there's no dashboards. It's living natively and native. Trying to sound like an engineer now. It's living inside Ashby and giving me information to allow me to make a judgment on an applicant based on their application.
Exactly.
Inside Ashby, so so for each job you create a scorecard and teach the system, right? And then
we measure the accuracy and efficiency. So at the moment we're looking at if you use that tool to reject the bottom 10%, 20%, or 30% of candidates, and because we've got basing this on data that says recruiters do 15 to 25 hours per week of sifting through CVs, that 10% of candidates, that saves you 2 hours, on average. This gives you sort of per recruiter per week, real time savings. We then give you what percentage of your interviews have come from that quartile, and then the number of CVs that you'd have to go through at, if you looked at the bottom 10% of scores that we're giving, how many CVs would you have to review to get to one interview?
An offer. Are you one interview, not even one offer?
Yeah, one interview.
Right.
So sorry, on the bottom 10% of applications, how many applications would I have to review on the ones that I probably wouldn't review? How many would I need to look?
It's how many chicken pluckers, I take it, is what you're saying.
How many people that would accidentally pass through the process, right?
Yeah, so what we see is at the top 10%, it'll be between 5 and 10 CVs that you have to go through to get an interview. And that's just because sometimes we rate a lot of people quite highly. And, sometimes you have lots of really excellent candidates for the role and you can be very discriminating. So that's your ROI there of like, right, here are the top 10% of scores based on, I don't know how many you've got per role or whatever, but here's your top 10%. And you'll if you look through those, one interview every 5 to 10 CVs. And then at the bottom end, we're seeing on average, it's like 350. In this example, it's infinity because there's 0 interviews coming from that bottom 10%. So this,
am I in there, Ben? Let's just am I in there?
No. I mean, well, I've only uploaded the 3 of us. So, technically, you're in the bottom.
Never.
You're in the bottom third, rather than,
which is like being in the bottom 10%, but there was only 3 of us.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's final thing. I know that we're coming up to time. The other thing that we're looking at is trying to make talent teams, look better internally. And I think one of the questions that we always get asked is, when are you going to fill my role? So this is something that we've done to try and solve that problem for talent teams, where we've basically got, this is your current pipeline, and we run a Monte Carlo method of simulations. We run 10,000 simulations on, is this person going to move forward or not? We randomize that 10,000 times. We add up when all those scenarios end, i.e. with a hire, and we give you this probability distribution. So it's not just sort of, am I going to get this role closed by the end of the month? Okay, cool, 63% chance. By the end of next month, 85. After that,
based on the quality of the applications.
No, this is
historical data.
This is just based on your historic,
So it could be a number of factors there. It could be in terms of hiring manager availability. It could be in terms of like recruiter availability, candidate availability, or challenges, number of interviews you've had. Okay, yeah. So this is based on previous data.
Yeah. So based on what you've put.
So it's like an expected time to fill in theory. You're giving that this role is on average we should be doing 63 days. What you've done so far.
Well, so here's the thing, right? When we've got time to hire, we go at like the 50th percentile, basically, right? We go at like, you're 50-50 likely to do that. And if you see this, like when you go with the average, half the time you're faster, half the time you're slower. But actually, this head of talent role, which I just launched today, it's likely that we're going to close it on in 8 days, 50-50. There's a coin flip. It's possible, right? That's where you'd be forecasting time to hire normally. But actually, even by the end of March, there's like 3 times in 20 that it's not going to get hired. And we know that's the case, right? But here's a way to quantify it to hiring managers. and you can talk about, right, is this enough of a business risk that we're not going to have an offer out for this head of talent by the end of March? And we know it now, right? We need that 85 to be a 95% chance. Okay, cool. Like, what can we do to move that forward? And you guys will know all the things, all the levers you can pull to make that happen. But that's this then updates. So you bring more people into offer stage, all this probability moves this way, gets more likely, everything goes a bit greener over here. And
fascinating. Have you thought about including hiring velocity in here as well? So that's with the percentage of roles obviously filled on time. So if we say the average time to fill is 60 days, and so it's for mass wise, we have 9 roles. We fill 3 in 30 days, 3 in 60, and 3 in 90. The average time to fill will be 60. Now, from a TA point of view, you're saying we hit that, but actually, if you look at people you placed, you didn't. You did 6 out of 9. So from a business perspective, you missed out 3 there. And we always will go on time to hire, but here you could actually give you that hiring velocity as well.
Yeah, and also this works much better in aggregate, right? So if I'm talking about say head of talent is maybe a bad idea, but I'm hiring software engineers, right? And I've got 20 software engineer roles. Actually, 85% of 20 is like 17 out of those 20.
Yeah.
So you actually start to get much more predictive in the higher volume of data.
The numbers. Yeah.
And when you're talking around that, like hiring plan, you're like, okay, cool. Like rather than saying, right, we're going to hire people in this amount of time, you can say, right, like what's our chance of hitting our hiring plan? Are you hiring 20 in March? Right. Well, like, pretty low in this scenario because, we're likely to miss out on 3 potentially.
Well, based on capacity, maybe putting this up against a capacity plan, right? Seeing where the bottlenecks are as well. That's really important.
Yeah. I know we're out of time as well, but there's always like an underlying here, which is you want to see where the problems are.
Yes.
As much as we can start saying that we're in percentages, I want to know when you don't hit it, what are those issues that's caused it to kind of go out much further than it should have done, or from what historical data has shown in the past.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely I think there's also sort of only so much that this can do, right? So a lot of this is like very much there to empower the talent team to use that to compare it to other things. You guys will know from your understanding of stuff that's not in the applicant tracking system what's holding these things up. And actually you can use these as well to sort of reflect back in an unbiased way much more quickly and easily than you would if you had to go into a spreadsheet, say, and like work out like, right, why does every time I recruit for X hiring manager, things grind to a halt and, we get hundreds of people rejected out of hand, right? You can do that much more quickly and be like, hey, like, look at all these greens. Yours is like really red. Like, I mean, you like kind of like reflect it back, like riddle me this, like, why are all our other processes going really well? But yeah, I mean,
works for us, works for everyone else, but not for you, kind of vibe.
Yeah, and like I think there's some cool things about plugging this into FP&A, where you can actually have that finance like really understand when you're live updating when you're most likely to hire, and if people drop out of final stage, it'll get reflected in their FP&A. Some sort of blended average of salaries or something would be really cool.
Oh, jeez, guys, that brings us, unfortunately, to our last. I mean, I can make it 3 questions, Darren, if you've got another one.
Yeah, no, 3 questions is fine. No, 2 questions.
So last 2 questions then. To you, Ben, which we've asked every guest that comes on the show. The first one is, what tools are you seeing in the market at the moment that you're really impressed with? Just give us a couple of those.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, I think Ashby's doing some really interesting things. I think they're doing a really good job of, getting to that. I feel like there's been like a inertia in the ATS market for a long period of time. And we just, again, come to accept a level of, acceptability that just sort of isn't there. Really excited and interested around Atlas. Again, not for in-house recruiters, but maybe a pivot at some point. What they're doing in terms of like fully native AI,
Jordan,
ATA.
Yeah, big up a fellow friend of the community here, Jordan.
And then met you as well. I think again,
Bingo.
like just like found a problem, solved it really nicely.
Yeah, agreed. Done it well. Nice people as well.
Yeah.
Trying to fix a good problem.
I think the only thing I'd say about that, we talked about AI bias, is like the bias that you get in notes taking is really subtle. Speaking with class around that, super interesting in terms of like broad Northern Irish accents getting poorly transcribed, right? Because there's not
exactly what he said on the show as well, right? Darren, it's exactly what he said. It's like it's really it can be more complex. The sentiment inside the AI note taker, it can cause many layers of bias.
I saw a really funny one that I was going to put on the forum the other day, which is called Hume.ai. It's not specifically for recruiters, but it is sentiment analysis and other bits and pieces on video. And I put me and my co-founders Y Combinator application video, and it gave us like 99.56% conviction or confidence. So I was just like, wow, this is broken, because I'm not sure that anyone could be that confident.
That brings us to our final question, which is an opportunity to shameless plug you, Ben. How can folks get in touch with you? Should they be interested in demoing the product, or just want to chat to you about AI, or come on the show, which is weekly AI in people and talent?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a tongue twister we've been struggling with. Every Thursday, which is a great watch, by the way, guys. Like, I was on the show. I've had my business partner on a couple of shows as well, which I've definitely joined to support. But I've joined a few shows now, and actually every time I've walked away learning some great stuff. Particularly the show that rings true to me was the episode you brought the study on a couple of shows ago. Adri was on it, with you.
Yes,
had
some really interesting studies that come out, and I think it's like there's so much happening in this space that it's like it's difficult to keep up. So we do that, and again, just to sort of veto what you said right at the top of the show, which was like you're too scared and don't know enough about AI, right? It's fine. It's got nothing. It's about the application of these things, right? And that's something that everyone in people and talent can speak to confidently.
So how can folks get in touch?
Yeah, LinkedIn's best, I think, or email ben@jobs@asi.com. But yeah, if you want to have a demo, you can book directly. There's a link in my bio. You can also jump on the 4 p.m. UK time. I don't know what it is, US time, but it depends where you are in the US, I suppose. But yeah, every Thursday you can jump on that event. If you just want to comment from the side, that's absolutely fine. We've got a couple of people who've commented a lot, and it was really added to the conversation as well. So yeah, all of these things are available.
Well, like I can say, I can also back that up. You've been super open to having all types of folks come on the show to talk, whether you know a lot about it, whether you don't. And that's been one of the most interesting things that's got me watching. So 100%.
I think that's the point, right? It's diversity of thought. It's the number one thing, right? In a
world of AI, when we're told what to think now by a computer, then in which case things like your show and hopefully this one, the BBC, if you're listening right now, we desperately want you to pick us up.
Keep plugging it.
I've been plugging it. I'll try. I'm just hoping that their AI will someday, sometime at some point, read our transcripts. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Ben. It's been enlightening as always. Great fun to have a Viking on the show, of course. And looking forward to having a beer with you in the future.
Absolutely, very much.
Yeah, I love the product, Ben. It's fascinating. Right, yeah. And thanks very much.
That's it for this week's show, guys. If you haven't already, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple playlists, wherever you're listening. And don't forget to check out the demo from Ben and many other of your favorite tools in the space that'll be live on our YouTube channel. That's it for this week. That's TA Tech Unboxed signing off.